Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than a creative tutorial. I'm going to be going over the difference between copying, referencing, and tracing. Now it might seem pretty obvious, and I know a lot of artists will obviously think, well, why would you copy art and post it, and then why would you trace it, and referencing is the way to go, and so on and so forth. But sometimes things can get a little funny. Copying and tracing is obviously really bad. You just shouldn't do it, right? Especially when it's someone else's art. However, there are cases in which I wouldn't say is okay or allowed, but would justify the method you're using based on your situation. So first we're going to go over what copying is. Copying, especially when it comes to when it comes to other people's art or pre-existing work that isn't yours, that you have absolutely no rights to, that you never paid for, it's not from a book you paid for, like for example, art models, or even any other reference book, or any stock photos that you've paid for, anything. If you're copying someone else's work and you have absolutely zero permission to do it in any capacity, you shouldn't be doing it. All right, it's bad. And it's extremely bad when you're doing that if you have the intent to sell or claim that as your own, right? And the whole purpose of copying is you're making sure that you're changing almost next to nothing of that image. Now, I'm not talking about photographs that you're using for reference or poses or anything. That's different, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's like if this were this picture of my cat here, if this were someone else's art and I started copying it exactly how it is, lighting, color, and everything, even if I did change it a little bit, like maybe I was like, oh, maybe I'll give the cat really big eyes instead of these realistic ones, right? And we'll give her a really tiny nose. And then we'll do this. But we'll do it like this, right? Even if you change it a little bit, if she's bothering me now, sorry, you're still copying someone else's work. The only time you should copy is if, one, you have no intent to sell, no intent to claim as your own, and no intent to publish this publicly. Copying is good for practice purposes if you're trying to learn how someone draws. For example, if you're looking at this, you're like, well, I want to try and practice how the style works. Maybe you're doing style studies for school, which does happen. A lot of times when you're doing character art, they ask you to do things in different styles, in which case you would want to get used to that style, and you would go, okay, well, this is, your head shapes are usually like this, and I'm gonna use this character to study from and copy this style a few times with this character as an example and get used to how things are going to go. At that point, that's okay. You're not using it for malicious reasons. You're not going to be claiming it as your own. You're using it purely for study purposes, and you have no intention to sell, distribute, whatever. That's the only time copying would be okay, is if it's for educational purposes, learning, or just practice. I really don't recommend you share that work at all unless you have explicit permission to do so. Don't copy unless it's for study purposes, and never share it, okay? And never sell it, never claim it as your own, none of that. Just don't do it, okay? Alright, so tracing. Tracing is pretty obvious, right? It's drawing over the image, either fully or partially. So maybe I'm actually gonna move this layer above her. Move. Right here. And let's say I'm tracing, oh, look at this. Okay, and her ears are thin. Right? This is tracing. Now, even if I'm not using the full image, maybe I want to give her this little, I don't know what's going on now. She's got a little tail here, got little paws. Boop, boop, boop. Right? That looks funny. So that would still be tracing, right? I traced an aspect of the image to work on my own stuff. As same with copying. Don't trace other people's work. Just don't do it. Stop. Don't. All right? And if you're doing that, don't claim it as yours, don't sell it, and give credit where credit's due. But obviously, do that, the original artist is probably going to be a little upset that you traced over their work, because that means that artist spent hours trying to make that work, and you basically went and traced over it and called it a day. Don't do it. All right? Just don't do it. Now, the same with copying. Tracing would be fine if you're using your own photos, like I just did. You're using it on your own work, like you're tracing your own work. Like, obviously, when you have a sketch and you scan in, or you want to outline it and make the line art better, you're technically tracing over it, but that's not the same, right? Even though the act itself might be sort of the same, it's not. Yeah, so now there are times when it's okay to do that. For example, if you're doing concept stuff and you just need something quick as a base model, and you take a picture of yourself standing in a certain way because you need it for whatever reference or whatever concept stuff you're doing, and you trace it over and you duplicate it multiple times to do different iterations of clothing, whatever nonsense, that's totally fine. And the reason that's fine is because you used your own image, you're not doing it for malicious purposes, and you're concepting something out. You needed something quick and fast. And a lot of artists, especially, again, in the industry, when you're working on stuff, sometimes you don't have days to perfect a model to basically get something down to put clothes on and make iterations of that. You don't have the time. And that's just the reality of it. And it's totally okay to be like, well, I have this image of myself. I'm going to use it to trace over this body, and then I'm going to make iterations of the clothes or hair or whatever it is. And that's fine. At that point, you're not... It's not taking someone else's work and tracing it and, calling it a day. It is what it is. And that's the one time I believe that tracing is okay. Or if you're, again, trying to learn, for example, if you don't know how, let's say, hand. Sometimes it's hard to see how a hand looks in the reference if the lighting's bad or something, so maybe you trace over it to see how the hand actually works. Again, for study purposes and learning purposes, that's okay so long as you're not trying to copy someone else's work and trace it and call it your own, okay? Never take someone else's work, never claim someone else's work as your own, never trace over it for your own personal work to sell and distribute and make money off of or claim as yours. Never do that, okay? Just never. And the last that we're going to talk about is referencing. Now, I did have like a workflow tips video, like, I don't know, at this point, I want to say it's 2 years ago. It's close enough to 2 years ago, about referencing and why it's important. So I'm just going to kind of recap that. And basically, referencing is being used to gain or see it's a visual guide for your art. And when you're referencing, you're intending to incorporate your own style or twist into it. For example, if I were to use like this cat doodle and the pink outline, even though I traced the head, but whatever, right? It's my photo. I'm using it for a reason. Let me actually move this so we can see, and we'll turn this off. So let's say I have this. Pretend I didn't trace the head, even though you can't really tell. It's actually more square. Whatever. Alright, so you get the idea, right? Let's say I want to reference this for lighting. I have my character here. I have it in a similar-ish pose. It's not perfect, but it's good enough, right? And I want to reference this for lighting. Now that's fine, as long as you're not copying someone else's work and you're using proper reference, like you're not looking at someone else's drawing for reference and how to light, because that's never a good idea. Because if they did something wrong, then you're just copying that, and then it's going to look wrong in your art. So if I'm going to use this for lighting, I would basically have this. It's hard because she's a dark and light colored cat. Basically the lighting's on this side, or the shadow. And this would be referencing. Even though this character has absolutely nothing in common with the reality of this photo, I am referencing to see how the lighting is, right? Let's kind of blend it, I guess. This looks horrible. But you get the idea. No, that's referencing. I'm not really looking to copy it exactly. I'm not looking to trace over it. I'm using it just as a visual guide to see how lighting works. And in most cases, almost all cases, reference is used for poses. And it makes sense because if you don't use a reference for a pose, how do you know how that leg is going to bend or look at a certain foreshortening angle, or it just, you need reference, right? The difference is, what are you referencing? Whose work are you referencing? And do you have permission to use it as a reference? Because if you're using someone else's artwork, or you are refusing to, basically, if someone's doing their own studies and you're using that as your reference, that gets a little, I wouldn't do it. You know, a lot of people do pose studies and post them online. I would only use those as reference for practice purposes on your own time, not for public consumption in any shape of the form, because that's all that is you trying to teach yourself. And then when you actually do draw your own, you should be using your own references or references of actual photographs or even video that you're allowed to use, or even just take some stuff from movies. I mean, at that point, that's fine, I think. Yeah, so the last thing too is there are a few things that kind of might be a little blurry. So for example, if I am literally copying what I see, such as still lifes, if you're doing drawing or pose studies of actual people in real life, or even the photographs of them, and you're using that, you're basically copying, but excuse me, I'm trying to think of how to explain this. When you're using still lifes and real people in a setup for the intention of recreating that in either a painting or a sculpture or whatever, theoretically, or not theoretically, but technically you're copying what you see, but you're not copying it for, let me think of the word, for malicious reasons. It's not someone else's work. It's basically a real life reference, right? So if I am going to be drawing something on my computer table here, I'm copying what I'm seeing. Obviously I'm going to pay attention to the light and shadow and the shape and form and everything, but I'm also doing it because I need to reference something, and a real life reference versus a photograph reference, you know, it is a little different. You know, your model's going to move subtly over the next hour, and you're not going to realize it till you go to finish the arm and you realize it's not in the same position as it was in the, you know, an hour ago. You know, stuff like that. And that's fine. It's a different type of copying, I guess. So that's kind of the only thing I can think of that would be copying sort of from what you see, but for a purpose that's legitimate, right? You're not taking someone else's hard work. And that's really all this comes down to. If you're going to be using someone else's work, then you need to start asking what you're using it for, why you need to use it, and why can't you use something yourself. You know, like in this age, there's so many ways to do it. Even if you don't have a phone, even if you don't have a laptop with a camera on it, you can go in the bathroom, there's a mirror in the bathroom, and you can use that as your reference. It's gonna suck because you have to keep going back and forth between your drawing and looking in the mirror, or even different rooms. But even if you look at it for a couple minutes, even 5 minutes, that really improves your drawing. It's just much better than relying on someone else to do it for you. Look at her little toes. Oh my gosh. They're just squished under there. And tracing is just, you know, in my opinion, if you're using it to copy, you know, to take someone else's work away, you're kind of being lazy. Like, you shouldn't be doing that unless you have, you know, plans to just use it for educational purposes, like when I did the cat here. Oh, like, just use your own work to reference and copy and trace from, okay? Just use your own stuff. Don't take it from anyone else. Don't take it from your favorite artist. Don't take it from anyone. If you want to start tracing and copying, do it on a sketchbook on paper. Don't share it with anyone. Label it as a study. Label it as a learning process. Label it that you're not going to be selling it. You're not going to be showing it in your portfolio to apply for a job. People have done that and it's shitty. Don't do that, because when people find out, you're going to fuck yourself over. Just don't. Alright. And a lot of that too comes down to respecting yourself. You should have enough respect for yourself as an artist not to do that. I mean, especially because I've seen some artists do that and they're good, and it's just like, why did you feel the need to even go this far, you know? And it's just, if you don't, it's just bad. Okay, all right, so I'm going to try and stop my ranting now. Okay. Hopefully this video was helpful. I know this is like a controversial topic to some people. I'm sorry if anything seemed a little funny or a little wrong to you. I did try and keep it more honest, like, hey, I'm not gonna sit here and say you should never trace or you should never copy or you should never reference or anything like that, because there's always a reason to do something in certain situations. You know, the whole purpose though is intent, reasoning, if it's your work that you're copying or referencing, all that fun stuff. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed looking at my cat. Her and her crazy big eyes. They're not that big, but I made them big because why not? And I hope that this helped you if you were an artist that was struggling to figure out why it's okay for some people to trace or copy and why it's not okay for others, you know. I hope this just gave you clarification on the difference between it all and when it's okay and all that fun stuff. Alright, so I'm going to end it here because I'm going to rant again, and I'm sorry. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more rants, I guess. I don't know. I don't like to do these things. I hope this wasn't super ranty. I promise I don't do them very often, if ever. Yeah, I'll see you guys next week with another video, or maybe the week after, depending on what I can come up with. And leave a comment if you have any questions or other comments below. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.